Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode of Justice for All Now. I'm your host, Henna Zubairi, and on today's segment, we will be discussing the impact of police brutality, not only on African American men, but also the impact it has on our Black sisters throughout the different communities. Today, we will be joined by Rhonda Dormuth, whose daughter was tragically killed by police near our nation's capital. With so much tragedy occurring all around us in light of the recent events, we often don't speak on how African American women are affected and often traumatized by these systematic injustices. Corinne Gaines was a pretty and petite young woman who at 23 had just joined a cosmetology institute. Her friends and family members say she was a voracious reader and they'd become accustomed to seeing her face in a book, reading late until the night. On August 1st, 2016, she was in a standoff with the Baltimore County Police, who had come to her Randallstown apartment, obtained a key from the office, and entered her home to serve her supposedly with a warrant for a traffic violation. Her fiance, Kareem Courtney, with a warrant related to an alleged assault. Fearful of police, she reached out to friends and family over her cell phone. Her 5-year-old son, Cody, stayed near her. Please join me in welcoming Rhonda so she can share with us what actually transpired.
Um, Hello everyone. Thanks, Hannah. Well, I had missed a call with my baby earlier that morning. I guess it was about the time everything was transpiring. And when I saw that I had missed it, I contacted her back and she said, someone's coming in my door.
Mm,
Basically, she didn't know who was coming in her door. And I guess eventually, after entering the door, she did realize that it was the police. Now, her being traumatized months earlier, she was not very happy about them entering her home. And she had armed herself with a legally owned shotgun, which she had when she heard them make an entry. Because initially, when they tried to get in, the chain was on the door. So they were able to open up her door and peek through. Again, by their own admission, they did not acknowledge who they were immediately.
mm,
So she took to the floor in her dining room, protected my grandson because, like I said, she didn't know who was there. But once she did find out, she wasn't prepared to go into their arms, because she had been traumatized by them. She had lost a set of twins a few months previous by the mishandling they had, placed upon her when they took her into custody over the traffic stop. A lot of it is I'm not gonna say a blur because I lost contact with her at a certain point because there were so many people trying to reach out to her because she had gone live. So a lot of my interaction with her was at the point of entry or right after they entered, and just after I got to the scene, um, where they had the I guess what they call what do they call those setups when they have the SWAT team and all that stuff. So it's so much, Lord. My heart is so heavy because of all these things that have been going on of recent. But again, she took up, in the house and would not come out, and then of course they sent the SWAT team. And the whole time I was with the team leader, I was told that it was all a mistake, that they weren't even there to serve her with anything. This is and my I had about 8 or 10 family members there with me. They could all validate this. They told me it was all a mistake, that they didn't that they had the wrong, they said it was a mistake, but basically it was a mistake, that she could come out and it was nothing, it would be fine, and they promised me that she would be fine. And I guess because she wouldn't come out in the timely manner, after what they call negotiations, when they wouldn't even allow myself to speak with her dad was there. They wouldn't allow her dad to speak with her. They said that they told us that they were going to videotape or audio tape and allow her father to get through to her. We still till this day don't know whether she heard the tape or not.
Mm.
All I know is in her final statements that she posted is that she felt alone, which to me indicates that she hadn't been in communication with somebody that she knew was there on the scene.
Okay.
I offered them the opportunity to just totally exonerate themselves from any charge, anything, if they would allow me to go in and
Exactly.
speak to my daughter. They told me no. They told me no about smoking her out instead of using lethal force. They told me that that wasn't a normal thing that they did because it gives too much finality, and it was a lot of things that were stated to me on August
Mhm.
1st, 2016 that still does not make sense
Makes sense. So they would not let you enter inside the home to de-escalate the situation.
at all. They wouldn't even let me speak with her. As soon as I got there, I called her therapist. Her therapist wanted to speak with the officer in charge. He hung the phone up when I handed him the phone. We'll get back to that. And he took my phone from me. I didn't have my phone for 2 days. They communicated with my family and friends as though they were me
What?
when they were yes. And I can prove that because I have the release document of when I received my phone back on the 3rd. Family friends were asking me, well, you were telling me, well, you were responding. And I said, no, that was not me.
Mm.
I did not have possession of my phone then. So it was a lot of things that took place that were just out of the norm in my mind.
So there was no mental health units that came by, nobody to de-escalate, and this is all over a traffic violation. A
Yes.
traffic violation. So I
Yes.
want our audience to realize this. This was not murder. This was not, a drug heist. This was not any sort of violence towards somebody else. This was a traffic violation that any of us, me, you, anybody could. Okay. Um, on that day, and she had her 5-year-old with her.
Yes. Yes. She had both of the children with her. Kareem Courtney, from his statement, the cops, when they did gain entry, held a gun on him. He was
Mhm.
holding Carson, who was 14 months old at the time, and he had Cody at his hip.
Mhm.
So he, listening to the commands of the cops, he told him, I have my baby in my arms. They instructed him to put her down.
Mm.
When he put her down, Cody left his side and went back to his mother, my daughter. So that's how they lost. People have a lot of things to say about him leaving her. That's not what happened. While he was putting the baby down, my grandson broke away and went back to his mother, whom he wanted to be with.
Mm. And so on that day, um, your grandson was also hit by gunfire,
Twice.
um, twice. And so they entered the house, and
Yes.
so your daughter went live on Facebook trying
Yes.
to record what was happening. Um, and then Corporal Royce Ruby
Yes.
went in with, and he had
Actually,
several.
he never went in. He shot her through the wall. This is a lot of things that people don't know, and this is in his deposition. He admittedly shot her through the wall, and in his words, in hopes of hitting her in her head. However, the bullet that entered into the wall hit her in her back and through her left side, no, her right side, and perforated both lungs and her ascending aorta. So based on the medical examiner, she was dead immediately. Like yeah, it was just took time for her to hit the ground. Then it was stated that once he waited, he went in and engaged her 2 to 3 more times center mass when she was down. And this is what came out in the trial.
So you had no idea. So you lost that day your daughter.
Yes.
What else did you lose that day?
I lost a piece of my heart. I lost, oh my God. It felt like a part of me died, especially being there and not being able to do anything. I'm right there at the scene, willing to negotiate with my daughter, willing to, risk my life with them behind me to go in and get my daughter out. And I was not afforded that opportunity. Again, I was told that if they allowed me to do that, that offered too much finality to the person, and that they would take their own lives and anybody in their custody. And then people saying that she was holding my grandson hostage. My grandson was beside the person he wanted to be beside.
That's just normal behavior of a 5-year-old who
Yes.
wants to be with their mother.
She was actually making a peanut butter sandwich when they shot her. She was at her countertop making a peanut butter sandwich when she was shot through the wall. All of this came out in the trial.
How long did it take you to know any of these details? Because one of the things that a lot of people do not understand is they think these are like regular cases where the prosecutor goes in and they prosecute, and a lot of the details are released to the press, or at least the families' lawyers know what transpired. When did you actually did you witness them shooting through the wall?
I did not witness it. I did not, because her apartment, she lived in a development, and so we were in a church, a little ways away from her apartment.
Hmm.
I didn't hear anything. I had no idea that anything had even transpired, because the team that was guarding my family, they wouldn't even let us move around.
Hmm.
They all ran out, and then a new group of officers came in, and I still had nothing, no idea what was going on, until I finally said, they're not going to stop me from going outside. And I went outside. As I went outside, the commander, or the head person in charge, I met him halfway. And when I got to him, I said, what's going on with my baby? And his words were me, she's gone.
Hmm.
His words were me is that she was gone. And then he went on to tell me that they were transporting my 5-year-old grandson to the hospital because they tried to say that she shot him. And this is why I thank my lawyer, J. Wendell Gordon, from the bottom of my heart, because he got to the bottom of this. Come to find out, he was hit in the right elbow, which was torn so badly they had to do reconstruction.
Hmm.
And then he was hit in the face with a ricochet from off the officer's gun. So he has a permanent, what people want to call a dimple, which is a battle scar. I don't see a dimple. It is beautiful because he's a handsome young boy, but it's a battle scar.
Hmm.
And something to remind him that he was shot in his face.
In his face. And he lives with you now?
No, he doesn't. He resides with his dad.
With his
I don't
dad.
get to see him as often as I like, but I believe he's okay. I really believe he's okay.
And what happened to the baby?
So my granddaughter was given to me before everything even, to finalize, before they killed my daughter. The housing people had her in their care, so they brought her to me because they took her from her father and had him in custody. So when they did take her, he was able to call me. They didn't find his phone on him when they apprehended him, and he called me when I was on my way to the scene, and he said, "Ma, they're gonna kill my wife." Those were his exact words. He said they're gonna kill her. So the level of aggression that he witnessed versus what they, explained versus what actually came out in court was high. It was high. It was high. For him to have automatically assumed that they were going to kill her, and ultimately they did. You know, and one more thing is, when the officer saw him on the phone, he was in the back of the car. He took the phone from him, and I could hear them. He was like, "I'm talking to her mother."
Hmm.
And so when I spoke with this officer, I do not know his name. I told him, I said, "I'm on my way. Let me help resolve this." He said, "Oh, it's too late." And that was like 9 o'clock in the morning. That was when everything had just unfolded. So what do you mean it's too late? You're gonna kill her regardless whether I get there or not?
And you yourself are a nurse. You're a
I'm
psychiatric
I'm
nurse.
a psychiatric registered nurse. Yes. I'm retired now, but yes.
So you could see what was happening to your daughter was a breakdown.
There was a crisis.
It was a crisis.
She was scared to death of to be in their custody. She did not trust them. And this was all in the wake of Freddie Gray, who was a neighborhood child from the area that she grew up with. So it was personal to her. And then to have her experience with them, when they took her into custody for that traffic violation, she was kept, they put her in solitary. They had taken her to the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
The hospital, knowing that she was pregnant, did all her tests, her levels, her HCG levels. I still have all these documents
Mm-hmm.
where when they took her into custody, her HCG levels, which are the levels that maintains a pregnancy, were fine. They put her, this had to be in the early afternoon. She didn't get out, well, wasn't dealt with until that next evening. So they had kept her in solitary by herself without food and water
Mm-hmm.
for all of this time. She finally was able to get a paramedic to call me because they had rushed her back to the hospital because she cried and begged and told them she was sick so long. They eventually took her back to the hospital. The paramedics that took her back to the hospital happened to be the same paramedics that transported her during the initial interaction with the police. So that was a
Mm-hmm.
whole like 24 hours earlier. The paramedic called me and said, listen, don't talk. Your daughter, I just transported your daughter back to Northwest Hospital, and they have not at the police station given her any food or water.
Mm-hmm.
And all of this was indicated in her lab. She was dehydrated. Her HCG levels had plummeted, which meant that she was in the process of losing two babies, not one.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a mess, you know. And this, I thank this paramedic. I don't know who she is, but
Mm-hmm.
she called me and she warned me. Come on, come on.
How long? So you know they what? So after all of this transpired, did you get to bury your daughter?
I did. I did get to. Actually, she requested earlier on, you know, that she wanted to be cremated.
Okay.
Yeah, she wanted to be cremated, and so that's what we did. We, you know, followed her wishes. I would have much rather buried her, but that was I was, you know,
Mm-hmm. Followed her wishes.
yeah,
Um, I want to go back to because this is very, very, very important for a lot of people to understand. The layer of mental health. The when we see a lot of these things on camera that are recorded now, and that's why a lot of people find out more about the cases of these shootings. And often at times there was a man killed in Atlanta recently who was having also another breakdown, a mental
crisis,
crisis.
crisis. Yes,
And so this is extremely important for people to realize that this young woman was pregnant, and at that time before when this entire traffic incident happened, and she suffered from lead paint poisoning.
yes,
We live in Baltimore City. A lot of this is what, when we talk about systematic racism and systematic
yes,
abuses against a minority population, is these are all layers of that
yes,
that a lot of the homes there have lead in the water, they have lead in the houses,
yes,
and so this also contributed to her situation.
yes,
um, your quest for justice has been very long.
yes.
And what was it easy for you to find out everything that had happened? What happened? Did you have to you hired a lawyer? Can please walk
Well,
us through?
My lawyer, J. Wendell Gordon, Esquire, excellent lawyer. He reached out to me because, not surprising, a lot of lawyers didn't want to touch me
Mm-hmm.
because touch the case because of the fact that I was black. My phone went out.
Yes. So while we get while we get Rhonda back on, I just want to remind the audience that Corinne was shot several times by the police officer as she was in her apartment, and um, and her son was struck in the face by the officer's gunfire. And then, almost exactly a year ago, a jury found that she was first shot, that found that the first shot that the officer had fired at Corey was not reasonable and awarded damages on the ground that the police had violated the Gaines' civil rights and had committed battery on the mother and son. And this also became, this their an award, a $38 million award after much work by civil rights lawyers and Corey's lawyer took place. But what I can tell you is this is the part of, the system is so set up against victims that in um, February of 2019, the judge took away the $38 million award to the from the that was given to the family of Corin Gaines, and that award was taken away. So, imagine the levels of trauma this family has gone through. That the trauma of losing your loved ones, the trauma of having to take care of young children who are yearning for their mother, the trauma of being outside and not being able to help, knowing medically that your child is having a mental health breakdown, and as a nurse you can help but you're not allowed to help. The trauma of having police who are supposed to be protectors. These cases are just um and the judge, in his 78-page decision, wrote that in evaluating whether the officer used excessive force, and he said that the facts must be examined from the perspective of the officer. The judge noted that Miss Gaines did not surrender to the police or put a shotgun down, and that 6 hours into the standoff, Miss Gaines moved from the living room to behind a wall in the kitchen. And you just heard the mother, the grandmother of this child who was killed, say that she moved because she was making a peanut butter sandwich for her child who had been in this traumatized situation for 6 hours. Yet the judge saw this as a tactical advantage that this 23-year-old was taking against trained police. Um, I am just flabbergasted when people in our communities don't realize the sort of privilege that they come from and what they're talking about when they say, oh, they don't realize how difficult these cases are against the police, how difficult they are to prove, how difficult they are to follow up on. And I'm hoping we can get Rhonda back on so we can talk about some more about several of these steps that were taken by her and her family, and how much work, emotional work and physical work, and has to be done, legal work has to be done to get any sort of justice, any sort of um, even when Rhonda and I were talking earlier, she was sharing how in social media her family has been disparaged because everybody has um, access, right? So that trauma again of having to go through a seeing your family being denigrated on social media by armchair activists, by people who are just watching the stuff on TV, and then after that, not being able to defend your child, not being able to defend your family. That's another level of trauma. And then every time another person is made target of an officer's, and every time another officer murders an innocent person and takes their life away, each one of these families relive their trauma. and especially those who have never gotten justice, because they know that there's there's no way for them to move forward on this. The laws are against them. Later on, we're going to be talking with Darlene Kane, who is part of the Coalition of Concerned Mothers, and the case, the legislation that was filed in the Maryland State Capitol on this, as well as other. There's Ayanna Presley has just passed a resolution in Congress. I mean, has presented a resolution in Congress that we urge all of you to go on to Justice for All and sign your concerns, send emails to your Congress people to get this resolution passed as soon as possible. For those of you who are in New York, we have an action alert on the Justice for All website that asks for that asks you to, those of you who live in New York, to get in touch with your delegates and your senators, state senators, to have and convene a session and pass the safer laws, safer New York laws. The governor of New York, Cuomo, has promised that if the Senate passes it, that he will sign the bills. So New Yorkers who are listening in, please get on the website and go sign. Go send an email to your Congress and Senate, state senators and state delegates, and ask them to pass safer laws in New York. Thank you for coming back on, Rhonda. I was just talking to the audience about the process of of getting some sort of justice. Can you share what that was like for you? How long did it take? What did it take?
You know what? Surprisingly enough, it didn't take long because I had a lawyer, J. Wendell Gordon, who believed in this case, who saw it for what it was. So he reached out to me. And from that point on, it was full charge ahead. He was able to obtain things that the media so called was putting out there, but he found out some things like the fact that she was shot in her back. The media didn't know that.
Mhm.
You know, the media didn't know that she was shot through her back through a wall. The media also didn't know that when they tested her for residue, which her gun was fired twice, she didn't have any gun residue on her anywhere. She didn't have, and so the fact that,
What
you
does
know,
that mean? So for someone who doesn't know anything, what does that mean when if she didn't have any gun residue on her? That means.
that indicated that she didn't have the firearm in her arms, in her hands to fire, because there's always some kickback from a shotgun, especially of some type of residue, but there was none found on her anywhere. You know, so there was a whole bunch of things that was was brought out in the trial that the media had no idea about. You know, they had no idea about, and even after it being revealed in court, they still didn't mention it. There was one reporter, Kate Amara, who actually shed tears with me when she sat in that courtroom, and she told me I had no idea. And that's what I wanted. The money was not an issue for me. I need people to understand that we couldn't get a criminal trial, so we went the civil way to get this information and all this evidence out. That was the only way we could do it, because otherwise it would have been your word against mine. And
Mhm.
whose word do they usually take?
Exactly, exactly. Obviously, they're going to take the word of the police officers.
You know, the case was a dynamic case in that they were able to get professionals to come out, experts to come out and shed light on what really happened, and to totally obliterate the lies that this officer first told the truth in deposition, but then got on the stand and lied. He told most of the truth while he was in deposition. I was there. I
Mhm.
sat across from that man while he told his story. And then all of a sudden, all the whole thing changes when we go to trial. The truth needs no adjustment.
So you saw these you saw them change their statements. You saw, how did you guys get get the so one of the things that I have heard is that it's super hard for families to actually um, get access to, like, for example, Antoine's law that has recently been proposed by Delegate Esavero. Why do we need Antoine's law?
We need it because we need the families to access what really happened to their loved ones. They need to be brought to the light and the forefront and the truth of what happened, especially when you're not there, especially when you're not witnessing. I wouldn't want to wish it on somebody witnessing their child getting killed for anything in the world. But at the end of the day, when you know that there's a real truth out there, you need somebody to advocate for you. And that person was J. Wendell Gordon. Whatever I needed to know, he was able to get answers for me. He invited me to all their depositions. I didn't go attend all of them, but I did attend Royce Ruby and another one. But he was the one I wanted to look at across the table and look in his eyes.
So this, we read this headline that came up. Tell me about this. Tell me, they awarded you the money. It was going to go to the children. Majority of the funds would have gone to the children so they could actually live a life that was, their bills would be paid for, their college tuitions, just all of that. And then it was, so here you lost your daughter, all of that, you attain some semblance of justice, and then it gets snatched back from you for what? What was the reason?
Well, the judge that sat on the bench, George Mickey Norman, who was a former state trooper,
Mm-hmm.
stated that the jury got it wrong.
The
That was
jury
his
got it
statement.
wrong.
That's what
Okay.
he said. The jury got it wrong. And so he went to appeal. You know, they went to the appeal process.
Mhm.
And this is the crazy thing. I remember, think it was in March or April we went before him. He told us they got it wrong. He even said that we tricked the jury. This
Oh.
judge sat on the bench and said we tricked the jury. Mickey Norman, that's what he said. He heard everything out between the two sides, he said, I will come back with my decision in 30 to 45 days. So I believe I think the award happened on February 15th, I think. It was a Friday.
Mhm.
He didn't come back 45 days later. He came back a year to date. He made us wait to a year to date, the date of them awarding us the money, to come back and say he was turning it over for qualified immunity.
And what is qualified immunity?
Qualified immunity is when an officer or a law enforcement has something happen in the commission of their work, and so they're not held liable.
So, okay. And did you know these terms before ever?
Absolutely not. I'm learning. I'm still learning. I'm still learning.
So
However,
you,
let me say that this same judge had qualified immunity offered to him 2 to 3 times. I know it was once in pre-trial, once in preliminary hearing. He blew it down each time. He basically said the officer didn't qualify for it, and then to come back and say, "Oh, I'm going to give him qualified immunity." It makes no sense.
I have a question for all of this. There's so many layers to this. So, judges, a lot of when we go and put in our vote, like yesterday was voting day, and a lot of us, and I got emails from friends. I myself have just moved to a new county, so I don't know the politics here. So I had to call up a friend and ask, like, who should I vote for, because
Right,
I don't know the politics of these judges. Are they pro victim, or are they pro, law enforcement? And just, a lot of things need to be looked up on. We found out that in Montgomery County, there's a judge who just does foreclosures on, housing policy, all sorts of stuff. And we never know about this. When
right,
we go, a lot of us don't even go out to vote.
right,
But others that do go out to vote blindly. They'll say, "Oh, that guy's name sounds familiar. Let me vote." Circle that. Have no idea what they're voting for, and
right.
so this is something like what you just shared is what is so powerful. Like, we need to know what these there needs to be some sort of, like, I think if some, I know the League of Women Voters does it, but it's so hard to find, and I would never like have known about it unless I was in this realm, working for justice. So there needs to be an accessible way that some of these like movements or some of these organizations that get a lot of funding should do that work and sort of vet all these people that are running for office on how they voted or judged these cases. And so there was should be a big black spot right next to this judge's name so nobody ever votes for him. People like that. But a lot of times these are political appointees.
Absolutely, absolutely. And like you said, we just doing the voting. I mailed mine in, and they had a list of about 8 judges, and I think maybe only 3 of them that I was familiar with. So and you don't have to vote for the ones that you don't know.
No, exactly.
You vote
And
for the ones that you know.
exactly. And the same thing with prosecutors too. Like, who are we voting for prosecutors? Um, this is it's uh, we keep coming back to this. So, what does the Coalition of Concerned Mothers do?
The Coalition of Concerned Mothers, it's a platform for mothers who have lost children to police terrorism. It allows us to not only uplift our children's names and go out and fight on a political level, like going to City Hall and going to the state capitol, but it's also a group of mothers that can just share each time with one another. You
Mhm.
know, we go through a grieving process that I think is like no other. And I'm not saying anybody's loss is any better than or any worse than others, but when you have your child killed tragically, it's easier to be amongst mothers who have the same heartache, the same difficulties getting along or moving forward with their lives, because we can look at each other. We don't even have to open our mouths to one another. We can look at each other's eyes and understand the pain. We have excellent. I have excellent family support. God knows I do. If I had to run them down, we'd be here forever. I have a huge and supportive family, but they can't understand what I'm dealing with. They have their own type of pain. But mothers, like the mothers of the Coalition of Concerned Mothers, we know. We know. We do things like we do get together and we do things, fun things, because there is a heavy measure of guilt for us returning to normalcy and having fun after we lose a child in the way that we've lost them. We actually feel guilty about minutes of happiness and, getting together and being silly because we've, to me, lost so much and so tragically that it doesn't seem like we can ever recover.
Mhm.
Marion Gray Hopkins is the president and co-founder of the Coalition of Concerned Mothers, and she and other mothers, we welcome other mothers to come in because again, we know each other's hearts. We know the struggle.
Mhm.
And I am actually involved with several organizations. The African American Policy Forum, say her name, they were one of the only all women organizations that reached out to me because, like you said, the women are marginalized, not taking away the loss of the men, but women are the ones that keep this earth moving. And there's no concern for a woman being killed and it's like their name is thrown away. Nobody ever thinks about them again. So I need that platform, the African American Policy Forum, to help me continue to keep my daughter's name alive.
And what does the policy forum do? How can we support the work?
Oh my goodness, the policy forum does so much. Again, they give us the exposure that we need. They give our children the exposure. They constantly uplifting. We travel with them. They take us and do things, self-care things that we need, and a lot of times aren't able to do for ourselves because we're not financially stable enough to do some of the things that they can afford us to do.
Mm.
It's so vast. Just the coming together, the camaraderie, the organization, the support from them, and the love that I feel from them, and I'm sure the other mothers could agree. Gina Best, India Kagan's mother. It's many of us that have to come together to find a space of peace, and we don't get it on our own. It's hard to get it on our own, because again, people don't really they sympathize, they empathize, but they will never understand the bruises that are left on our hearts. And then especially have to go through a trial, and then whether it's win lose initially or to win and then have somebody snatch it back. All of those things are traumatic. I'm telling you, it leaves no room for healing.
Mm.
And
No.
then when we have to constantly hear more black and brown bodies being massacred and murdered in the street, it just picks a scab for us. It will never heal. I call it my scab picking moment, because before it can heal, here it comes again. Here it comes again. Some more people, some more black and brown bodies being affected. Breonna Taylor, nobody is really speaking out about her.
Hmm. She was in her bed too.
She was in her bed. So that, to me, that's why it's important for women's names to be uplifted as much as men. I love my Mike Brown. I love his mommy. Okay, I love Tamir Rice. I love his mommy. I love Eric Garner. I love his mommy. I love Oscar Grant. I love his mommy. It's just so, it's so many people who have held a high platform that still get recognized. But then we have the Marion Gray Hopkins, who, her son doesn't get mentioned unless she mentions it.
Alonzo.
No, that is actually, Lord have mercy, she gonna kill me. Not Alonzo's mom.
No, not Alonzo's mom. No, I'm saying
It's
Alonzo's name doesn't get mentioned
Yeah,
either.
Alonzo's name doesn't get mentioned. Amir Brooks. These are names who have just washed and waned away with the water. But it's
Dr.
up to
Iksan's
us to
kids.
keep their names alive.
Yeah, it is. It is. And so when you see a lot of people are, uh, at least on social media, seem like they're activated this time.
Yes.
This is the first time in our communities that in Maryland, just yesterday, about 12 mosques released a statement on police brutality. This was a major step because for the Muslim community, to speak out is a big step forward because they're so scared all the time that they're going to be called in and targeted, for because of Islamophobic views and anti-Muslim hatred. So they tend to like really step up side by side with the state.
Yes.
And we're good citizens and all of that. So for them to get out and finally make a statement, this was a big move for this. So people's hearts are being moved,
Yes.
and but this I'm very scared that this entire energy will be wasted, that
Yes.
no structural or policy changes will come into effect. So what changes do you want to see? What changes do you want Governor Hogan to do, your congress people to do, your senators to do? What, as an impacted family who has lived this?
So this is my personal perspective on law enforcement and the way they're handled. Number one, they need to be drug tested.
Okay.
To me, after every firearm situation, they need to be drug tested. They need psychotherapy, because a lot of these gentlemen, these officers come back from the war. They're already war stricken,
Mm.
put PTSD. There are things that needs to be done for them as a regular civilian would have. When I was a medic, if you did something or something occurred and it didn't and it wasn't of protocol, they took you and drug test you.
Mm.
And
That's a
trust and
real
believe,
problem.
there are a lot of law enforcement that use steroids. I'm a nurse. I know what steroids can do to the mind after habitual use and overuse. Okay, there are so many things in the policy itself that needs to be changed.
Mm.
Even if it's a minor infraction, they need to be held accountable for. Look, if I give a patient the wrong medication, do you think that that's all it's going to be, or you gave them the wrong medication? And it
Mm.
could have been genuinely an accident. But I'm going to be held accountable. Why are they above being accountable? And I think if they implement more of these things on them, they would be more careful in how they deal with the public, how they deal with their own behavior. They have to have some level. They don't seem like they have any level of accountability. And the
Accountability.
fact And the fact that it's kept from the public what the accountability, if they're held accountable, what the punishment is, that's not fair.
Hmm.
Because the
Why
people
is it?
who,
Why do you think that is? Why is the police protected so much when our doctors aren't protected, when our nurses are not protected in that manner? They're dealing with lives too. They're public servants. They're paid by our tax dollars. They, firefighters, all of these service, they're servers. They serve the
public
American.
servant,
Yeah,
public servant.
exactly, public servants. So then why do you think police is protected? And a lot of times when we talk, like Gina talks about this a lot, her daddy was a police officer, her family members are police officers, so she is from an office, off from a police officer
And
family.
so am I. I have retired law enforcement in my family.
Mm,
Okay, and don't get it wrong. I don't hate police. I hate what some of these police do. I hate what they get away with. You understand what I'm saying? There's no way that, I mean, I know that they're good officers. God knows I do. But the bad officers are casting a veil over the good officers.
mm,
So that none of them are being trusted. So back to your question, like, what do I think should be done? At the end of the day, let us see the accountability. Don't just tell us, oh, we're going to take care of that,
mhm,
because we need to have some healing too. We need to have some healing too. We need to understand that what this person did, that you're going to hold them accountable.
exactly,
It's
exactly.
just it's just unreal.
How many mothers are in this the concerned mother coalition of concerned mothers?
Okay, last count. Let me see. Let me get it right now. So let me see. Marion. mm, It was around 10 or 12 last count. But you know what we do is, it's our organization. But every once in a while, we branch out to other things. We
Mm,
support other organizations, and other organizations support us.
okay,
So collectively, it's probably around 12.
okay.
But other
And
people
so
come
and
and,
but there certainly aren't just 12 cases,
oh, absolutely
right?
not. Absolutely not.
So this is something. Do you have any idea how many family members are affected by murder by police in Maryland or in this area?
I'm still finding out about more.
Hmm.
So I'm to the point now where I'm not even surprised when I have somebody reach out to me and say, can you speak to this mother? As a matter of fact, I have to do that because there is a mother that needs to have some comfort and some understanding, and I have to call her. But this is a constant thing. It's sometimes overwhelming.
Just last year, 1,000 people were killed by police, and this is every year. 1,000 people get killed by police. Nearly 60% of the victims did not have a gun, were not involved with any activities that would require police intervention, and or have behaviors like mental health crises.
Yeah.
And
The crisis is the big issue for me, because to me, these officers, they say that they've been trained to understand crisis, but I don't think they get the theory of how crisis works. If somebody is out of sorts, just you communicating with them aggressively can escalate it. And I'm not sure whether it's intentional or just a lack of knowledge of how you interact with people who are going through a crisis. They had a scene where Denzel Washington was able to intervene with a man that was in crisis, and he was able to bring this man calm and allow him to be detained without having harm brought to him.
mm,
So it depends on the heart of the person who is addressing the situation too, because we all know that there's some extremely racist law enforcement.
mm,
And
okay.
so if they go into the situation feeling like, oh, you deserve this, or this is where you come from, so they're not going to have the same compassion. The
Okay.
compassion is going to be limited.
Exactly.
And I've met white friends who have lost their children to law enforcement too.
Mm,
So then you have those ones that are not only raceless but just reckless and careless.
And this is very hard for some other countries to understand, especially in the Western world, because Germany, England, the police over there are not armed with guns. They're not armed with anything. I think maybe they might have batons or something, but that's
Right,
about it. So for them, it is very hard to understand why are police. There's so much. They're not only do they have guns, but they have military grade equipment, and we, as we're seeing right now with the protesters, and there'll be peaceful protests, and then they will turn violent because of the violence of the police.
right,
Um, so one of the things that we Justice for All is a part of the National Coalition against racism and repression,
right,
and one of the main platforms is to establish civilian control of police.
right,
And from its inception, NAARPR has campaigned against police crimes committed primarily against the poor and people of color. And this alliance initiated a campaign to stop police crimes. Victims of those crimes and their families are actively involved in this alliance. It's based out of Chicago, but and then they had that, but they have chapters in every city, every state. And
hmm,
on May 30th, that's it was a day of protests, and the Baltimore protest then was arranged by that alliance. And this alliance is organizing for the passage of legislation to establish an elected civilian police accountability council that holds police officers accountable for crimes such as assault, murder, torture, and racial profiling. So this how would you think this is something that can I know we have civilian
review boards.
yeah, review boards here in Maryland, but what is your has been your experience with them?
Actually, I haven't had any experiences with them. My case came up and went to trial so quickly, quicker than a lot of people could have ever expected.
Mhm.
So unfortunately, and I'm not even gonna say unfortunately, I'm gonna say
Maybe because it was so egregious.
right,
So
right.
egregious.
So I mean, I'm praying that the people that they have put into these places to carry out, just observing and trying to rectify the behavior or modifying it in some way. I hope that these people are true to what they're there for.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah,
I.
this is one of the trouble that we have seen especially in Prince George's County, is those civilian commissions then do not issue reports.
Mm-hmm.
Why aren't those reports issued? Who's sitting on? Who gets selected to be on those commissions? And how does that? Who polices them, or who accounts for them?
Right.
So this is it's a terrible situation. And yeah, this is something. Yeah, this is a someone who, Farhana, is lives in the United States now, but she's from South Africa, and she says the U.S. law enforcement is extremely militarized compared to other countries. And we're seeing this, and this is something that. So how does it make you feel also, um, that when you see the protests take place, does that give you hope, or does that make you apprehensive?
No, it definitely gives me hope because from what I know, protesting has allowed us to make the steps that we have had over these years.
Mhm,
And unfortunately, there's going to be collateral damage,
mhm,
with property and even people. And it is unfortunate, But when you have people who are out there enraged at what's going on, and then they don't have faith,
mhm.
you can't have faith in something that has not worked for you.
That is true.
So this is the way they express themselves. You hear people say, "Oh, they shouldn't be," but no, maybe they shouldn't. But is it getting your attention?
Hmm. You
Are you
can't.
hearing them now?
Are you worried more about the property than these lives that have been lost?
Exactly. That's where I
Mhm.
was going next. What's more important, a building or a person, a life?
And these are the life that you are what's behind the scenes, the parents, the children, the uncles, the aunts, everybody who loses a person that did not need to happen, right? That it did not need to happen. That is what is most egregious about these cases, is that they just did not need to happen. We're a little, we're almost out of time, so thank you so much for being here and sharing. And I hope that we can activate people
Right,
who see the humans behind the tragedies, who the humans behind the newspaper headlines. That these are the people who actually lose their loved ones and then have to suffer through loss of reputation and people attacking them and the media spin and the media narratives and everything else that goes on after normally people lose someone and it's so tragic, but they bury their child or they bury their loved one and that is the end of it. But for
right.
you, you have to keep reliving it and reliving it. And for that, I am grateful to you for having the courage to be out there. And I see you at rallies and you're speaking and you take your pain and you make it into something so powerful. So thank you for that. And we, just but we urge people to support the coalition, donate to the coalition,
Yes,
support the African American Policy Project, so these mothers can at least have a day or two, where they can be taken to, get together and just stop reliving the pain on a daily basis.
yes, absolutely. And I just want to say this, and that's why I say it's like picking a scab. I shed real tears and I hurt with every family member who are actively and have lost their loved ones to police terror. It's the most painful thing ever. The people that are supposed to protect us are killing us. And so the
Mhm.
pain is real.
The pain is real. The pain is real.